Hello, my first graders. Today we're on lesson 21. So I'm going to start off with our words to know. Few, night, loudly, window, noise, story, shall, world. Listen to them again. Few, night, loudly, window, noise, story, shall, world. So I'm going to point a few things out. Here's our word few, that EW, we've seen that before. It makes the ew sound. Few. Night, we have seen that in the last couple of stories. Look, N-I-G-H-T, right? Night. Light, right. Do you see the I-G-H-T? I-G-H-T, look, I-G-H-T. When we see that, it makes that ite sound. L-ite, r-ite, n-ite. Okay, so I wanted to point that out to you. Night. Loudly. There's our O-U, loud, loud. And here we can even cover up the L-Y, the ending. Loudly, loudly. Window. We have win, O, window. The O-W makes the O sound in this word. Window, window. Noise. The O-I makes an oi sound, which we haven't learned yet. I think it's our first time seeing it. Noise. Story. Okay, we have the ST blend, or, and then the Y at the end of this word makes an E sound. Story, story. Shall. Now, I know we see the SH, the sh sound, and it's ALL we know as all, but it's not shawl, it's shall. Shall. Like, we shall pick apples today. We don't use this word all that often anymore in our speech. It's more of an older word, but we shall go to the store today. It's another way of saying we will. World. You see the or in it, but it doesn't really make that or sound when you're reading it, so it's just one of those words that we have to know. World. Right. Again, we see our pictures and our words, so you can always look at our book room, lesson 21 book room, okay, and you'll see a picture of these where you can read it, as well as you can check it out on Think Central. All right, let's preview our topic. Gardens. To make a garden grow, you start with seeds. You plant them in the soil. Then you take care of them. You make sure they have enough water and sunlight. Soon the seeds will start to grow. Tiny plants will pop up in the soil. They will get bigger. Soon you will have big plants with flowers or vegetables. Next, you will read a story about what happens when a character named Toad plants some seeds in the garden. All right, so the story we're reading today is called The Garden. Okay, as we're reading, we're going to be thinking about our story. There's going to be characters, setting, and a plot. A plot means events that happen, what happens in the story. Sometimes there's a problem, which we'll see in this story, and then what happens that relates to the problem. How do they solve the problem? All right. The Garden, from Frog and Toad Together by Arnold Lobel. So my first graders, The Garden is taken from a series. Frog and Toad are an actual book series. Okay, and here it is right here, Frog and Toad Together. It's a chapter book, and in the chapter book, there's many stories about Frog and Toad. Each story is a slightly different from the other. So the book is called Frog and Toad Together, and this is one of the chapters from that book. Arnold Lobel is the author. And again, you can go on Think Central to read about Arnold. And he's also the illustrator. He drew the pictures. So what I'm going to tell you about this story is Frog and Toad, when I was growing up, is stories that I used to love reading. I would go to the library and I think I've read every single story about Frog and Toad. They were some of my favorite characters and I enjoyed reading the stories. To me, they were interesting. I really enjoyed the events that happened and sometimes they were funny. So I hope you enjoyed this too. And if you do, there are many stories that you can take out about Frog and Toad. And again, they usually come in a chapter book, and in each chapter, they tell a new story. There's usually 4 or 5 stories in each book about Frog and Toad. So it's 4 or 5 chapters. Our story is a fantasy. A fantasy is a story that could not happen in real life, could never, ever possibly happen. That's what makes it a fantasy. And again, a fantasy, if it could not happen ever, that means that it is a fiction story. It's fake. So take a look at our picture. Right away, you see why it's a fantasy. Why could this story never happen? Yeah, look at them dressed in clothes. Have you ever seen a frog or a toad dressed up in regular clothes before? No way, right? And you're going to see as we go through, they're going to act like people. There's going to be many things that they could never possibly do, but it shows up in our story. So this is a fantasy. Animals are going to talk and act like people, and so it makes it so it could never, ever possibly happen. So I hope you've enjoyed this story as much as I do. So again, The Garden from Frog and Toad Together. Frog was in his garden. Toad came walking by. "What a fine garden you have, Frog," he said. "Yes," said Frog, "it is very nice, but it was hard work." "I wish I had a garden," said Toad. "Here are some flower seeds. Plant them in the ground," said Frog, "and soon you will have a garden." "How soon?" asked Toad. "Quite soon," said Frog. Toad ran home. He planted the flower seeds. "Now, seeds," said Toad, "start growing." Toad walked up and down a few times. The seeds did not start to grow. So let's stop for a second and think about what we read so far. So we have Frog and Toad. So remember, Toad is smaller. Toads are kind of bumpy, right? So that's Toad, and here's Frog. They looked at his beautiful garden. Look at Frog's beautiful garden, right? And Toad wanted a garden like that. So Frog gave him seeds, right? And Frog told him it was going to be a lot of hard work. So he planted the seeds, right? He planted the flower seeds. And now Toad is telling the seeds to start growing. Are seeds going to grow that way? Think about what you know about planting a garden. Do you put them in the ground and then command them to start growing and they grow? No, right? It takes a while, doesn't it? Right? You plant them. Think about the things you have to give them. Toad put his head close to the ground and said loudly, "Now, seeds, start growing." Toad looked at the ground again. The seeds did not start to grow. So he's shouting at them, right? If he's saying it loudly, "Now, seeds, start growing." Saying it louder, is that going to make them start to grow? No. Toad put his head very close to the ground and shouted, "Now, seeds, start growing." Frog came running up the path. "What is all this noise?" he asked. "My seeds will not grow," said Toad. "You are shouting too much," said Frog. "These poor seeds are afraid to grow." "My seeds are afraid to grow?" asked Toad. So he keeps repeating, right? Now seeds start growing. Is that going to help? No. Now Frog comes running up. He hears them, right, from down the street. And he's like, why are you shouting at them? Now he told them that the seeds are afraid to grow. Can seeds be afraid to grow? Is that a thing? Can seeds be afraid? Let's see what happens. Of course, said Frog. Leave them alone for a few days. Let the sun shine on them. Let the rain fall on them. Soon your seeds will start to grow. So let's stop for a second. Think about what we know. What do seeds need to grow? What do you need to give a seed to grow? Do seeds need to be watered? Yeah, rain fall on them. Do seeds need to have the warmth of the sun? Yes. Even with the rain and the warmth of the sun, are they going to go boop right away, start growing fast? No, it takes time, right? Many days go by before seeds start to grow. If you've ever planted a seed before, you know you have to be patient and wait. It takes a while. They need sunlight and water and time. So I want you to think about what you know so far. Frog said, wait a few days, right? Let the sun shine on them, the rain fall on them, and they'll start to grow. Does Frog really think that the seeds are afraid? Probably not, right? He's just trying to get Toad to stop shouting and to be, do you know what it's called when you have to wait nicely? Patient, right? He needs Toad to be patient, to wait for the seeds to grow. So he's just trying to get Toad to be patient and to stop shouting. That night, Toad looked out his window. Drat, said Toad, my seeds have not started to grow. They must be afraid of the dark. Toad went out to his garden with some candles. I will read the seeds a story, said Toad. Then they will not be afraid. Toad read a long story to his seeds. I want you to think about this. If seeds didn't start to grow, would the seeds grow in one day? No. Can seeds be afraid of the dark? No, right? Seeds aren't afraid of the dark. Plus, you plant the seeds in the ground, so it's already dark. All the next day, Toad sang songs to his seeds. All the next day, Toad read poems to his seeds. All the next day, Toad played music for his seeds. So think about it. Another day he's singing, another day he's reading, another day he's playing. So that's 1, 2, 3 more days that went by, right? Now, did his seeds need him to do these things? Is that important? When you plant a seed, do you need to sing to it or read to it or play music for it? No. Toad looked at the ground. The seeds still did not start to grow. What shall I do? Cried Toad. These must be the most frightened seeds in the whole world. Then Toad felt very tired. He fell asleep. So, are these seeds frightened? No. Why does he think that they could be frightened? Because his friend said something about the seeds being frightened, right? His friend Frog. Toad, Toad, wake up, said Frog. Look at your garden. Toad looked at his garden. Little green plants were coming up out of the ground. Look what happened. They started to grow. At last, shouted Toad, my seeds have stopped being afraid to grow. And now you will have a nice garden too, said Frog. Yes, said Toad, but you were right, Frog. It was very hard work. I want you to think about this. Did Toad need to work so hard to get those plants to grow? Did he really need to sing or light candles for them? I want you to think about that. No, right? Those are things that you don't need to do. If you've ever planted a seed before, right after you put it in the ground and you make sure it has sunlight and water, it'll grow on its own. It doesn't need your help, right? Seeds can't be afraid. They don't have feelings, do they? Plants, they don't feel. They're not the same as people. People have those feelings. Remember we read about feelings, about being scared or happy or sad? Plants do not have feelings. They don't know if they're happy or sad. They don't have a brain like we do, where we're thinking those things through. Okay, what made his plants grow? Think about this. Was it any of these things that he did? No. So he did these things on all these different days. What was it that let the plants grow? The sunlight, the water, and what else did he give it? He gave it time. These were a couple days, wasn't it? He planted his seeds, right? He read to them at night. These were different days, right? He gave them time. And when you give something time, a plant time to grow, then it will be able to start growing. So it needed the rain, the sun, and time. So again, do plants have feelings? No, right? They don't know. Plants don't know that he was reading to them or singing to them, right? It's because he did all those things because Frog told him that they were afraid. All right. I hope you enjoyed this story. When you have a chance, go on Think Central and read the story on your own. Remember, it's on Think Central all week long. Get on there and practice reading your story.